to that, there was not as much technology. Video games necessarily weren't a huge thing for us in our home. So I know it's definitely become earlier and earlier that kiddos are getting electronic devices from iPads, sometimes from school and from different things. And so one thing, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, there's not necessarily a wrong or a right. We are going to talk about some recommendations that different medical doctors do give in terms of ages to start tech and things like that. But what's more important sometimes is us to reflect on the purpose. And I have a center in Crystal Lake. It's a Center for Emotional Wellness. And one example I thought of when I saw this picture is many parents will come into my office, and sometimes they have littles with them, little children, around 2 or 3. And one thing I noticed more recently in the last couple of years is many of the parents will use the iPads almost like a device to keep their children kind of entertained. And so when a parent comes to talk to me, I notice right away they're giving, a lot of times the child the iPad or a phone to play on. Now, this is not necessarily wrong or right, but it's interesting to me that prior that might have been something like a game or coloring books or things like that. So one thing that we're talking about is maybe kind of the purpose. We're going to look a little bit tonight is what is the purpose for the tech use? How are we using it? And are there other things that we can do to mix it up? So that's something that I think is really important. Another thing I've really learned recently in talking to parents is how much we model our tech use. And I know some of the questions that came in tonight were about social skills and social interactions and how that gets affected by tech. And I think we're going to go into that too. But one story that I think about is so often I have kids tell me that they feel that they don't have a lot of adults to talk to that aren't distracted by their own tech use. And our kids are telling us that they need more time with us. And so one thing I remember is when my older daughter was a lot younger, when she was like around 2 or 3, when we would have conversations, we made eye contact and we were really present with one another. And the reason we were is because I had a hard time with eye contact and just some of those social skills when I was younger. And it was really important for me to teach her. And so one thing I remember is when I was speaking with her, I really tried to be mindful of eye contact and things like that. And so as these kids are younger, just being mindful of how much they're on the tech and how it does impact them. And the next slide, and we're going to go into all this in more detail. For many families, they can relate to this picture. And this is a picture that I work on a lot with families. And if you feel like you've been at this point more often than not, this is going to be one of those signs that maybe, we need to kind of switch up how we're handling things around tech. But this is common. And as we're going to talk about tonight, some kids are actually more prone to having just addictive behaviors with tech. And so sometimes you find that when you do set an expectation, your child may get really upset, get really agitated when it's time to get off the tech and things like that. And I'm going to provide some strategies for that. But if anyone can relate to this picture, you are not alone. This is really common. I hear from parents a lot that this can happen, especially around video games. It's interesting, when we were younger, for many of us, we watched TV, and TV shows typically have a beginning and an end. You would watch your TV shows, maybe you'd watch 2 at a time, but then you would go do something else because the show was over. It had a stop. And a lot of times for me growing up, that stop was when the news came on, right? We would have our shows and then the news would come on or something like that. Kids now don't have those official kind of beginning, middle, and ends. A lot of the stuff is streaming, it's ongoing. It goes just to the next thing. And there's a method to that. A lot of the designers of different apps and games actually design these games and apps to keep the child's attention, to keep the momentum going. And so children do have a hard time because there are not those natural breaks like we used to have with our programs and things like that. As we go to the next slide, some things we're going to talk a little bit about tonight and just some of the key areas that we want to preserve around child development, just the impact on health that tech can have and how mindful we want to be just around how we're using it and the effects, different types of tech, and how it can affect our mental health and how our mental health can affect our tech use. We're going to look at some research, look at some of the addictive behaviors, as well as I'm going to provide some different parenting supervision apps and some different ways that you might want to establish some boundaries in your home. Again, I am very cognizant that some of these points are very, very difficult and challenging. Typically, when I'm working with families around this topic, it's not easy. So I want you to understand that I do know that it's not easy. If you have a child that is really, really into their tech, it is not easy just to say, okay, it's time to get off. Sometimes kids will become really agitated, and some of the kids I work with even have responses such as verbal and physical aggression. And so again, if your child's struggling tonight, as I always say, there is help out there, and we're going to help you and support you tonight. So on to the next slide. And this one I'm going to go over pretty briefly, but just in terms of, and I know everyone on here has kids of different ages, but when we look at child development, we look at some of the milestones. And for instance, for younger children, we really want them to be working on things like hand-eye coordination, multitasking, reaction times. We want to provide opportunities for them to learn these things. It doesn't mean that they're not going to get it through tech, but we don't want tech to be the only way they get it. Some of these skills are going to be made through just playing with other kids, through creative play, through imagination, through talking and spending time in conversation. And so we want to try, in particular with the younger children, to have more of a balance and less tech use. As we're going to talk about, I think it's suggested about 30 minutes for kids, and not until they're about 2 years old. Really working on the social skills and getting movement, exercise, and eating habits. And the reason I bring this slide up, because it's so key that kids during childhood, let's say ages 2 to 5, 2 to 7, are learning how to maneuver tech. Because the kids that I find that start off and they're not learning healthy boundaries around tech, and they're not learning healthy uses, and they're missing some of these other areas, they're going to be more likely to have issues with tech as they get older. And so for the younger kids, I do get concerned if they're on it so much. And so I encourage parents to use things like books and coloring books and puzzles and in games, like when they're in the car or the waiting room, move away from always being on like an iPad or a phone, but come up with different things to use, as well as being mindful. And this one's hard too, as adults, just being mindful when we're with our kids, not being on tech ourselves. Because again, we're modeling and we're teaching how to use it. And that's something that they're picking up on. On the next slide, these are some other things that we're working on with our younger kids, and this is something really I'm working on with the high schoolers and the middle schoolers as well. Being able to ask a question, have conversations, greeting people, manners, things like that, working on really connecting to others. So if you have a child that you're concerned struggles with one of these areas, it's a good time to practice, apologizing, being able to negotiate, even dealing with feeling left out, and being able to concentrate on one task without getting distracted. And the reason we're kind of leading off with this is these are things that have been falling off a little bit with the increase in tech use. We're hearing many reports that kids are struggling more and more with these different areas. And so we want to make sure, again, that they're having opportunities for live interaction and opportunities to practice these different things, and not just at school, but within the home as well. So on the next slide, some of the conditions I treat in children and adolescents are, and I know this slide's a little bit hard to see, but we know children sometimes with mental health issues can be more prone to be addicted to tech, with things like anxiety. I would say at the top, ADHD, autism, but also kiddos that are struggling with depression, substance use disorders, mood disorders, eating disorders. And then we're going to go over tonight tech addiction, which is one that is real right now. People are reporting it, both kids and adults, that they're having a hard time getting off tech, that they often can recognize they don't feel better as a result of being on it, but yet they're drawn to it. And so we're going to just look at that tonight as a topic. So on the next slide. And this is something, when I was doing my research, there's a lot of really great research and resources out there, but I wanted to point out, as we start this topic, one social psychologist and some of what she found, because I thought this was pretty interesting. And one of the things she talked about, and this relates to many of the kids I work with, digital technology can provide the illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship, without the demands of intimacy. This was so interesting to me, because so many parents will say to me, I feel like I can't limit my child's tech because that's how they communicate with their friends. Their friends are all in the computer. They don't really kind of play with friends outside of the tech. And so it's interesting when you look at this, because so often it is really that illusion of companionship, but not necessarily in the same way that it would be if it was in person. I liked her second point, that she concluded that an over-reliance on digital communication can result in feelings of real-world isolation, that many kids are actually reporting feeling more lonely despite increased tech use, oftentimes when they're in their room and, using tech in isolation for hours and hours a day. Many of those kids will tell me that they are, in effect, feeling more lonely. And sometimes, depending on what they're being exposed to, even more depressed and more sad. And the last point, when they're always connected, children and adolescents and even adults may become dependent on the presence of others for validation in the most basic ways. They start to need other people to feel validated, and they cannot approach others as full individual differentiated people. And Marley's going to talk about that tonight, just how the more likes we get, the more we're on social media, how that does really create that dependency, and how that influences how we feel about ourselves and our validation. And I've had many, just this week, many conversations with middle schoolers about how they view themselves. And a lot of that has been tied to kind of what they're seeing on sites like Instagram and other social media sites. And the next slide too, and if anyone wants a copy of this, I can definitely share it with you. A fun little activity to do with your children, to do with your family. And this is something that I tried to do recently this week, and it was interesting. But David Levy, a professor from the University of Washington, has the cell phone observation, where he asks people to take out their phone, hold it in their hands without turning on the screen. Notice if there are any particular thoughts or feelings. Is there anything specific that you want to do immediately? And you can kind of read the rest, but it really does. It walks you through being aware of how you're feeling when you open up certain things on your phone. And it's interesting. I found myself like a week ago, I was in the bathroom and I was like on my phone. I mean, I was like, what am I doing? I think sometimes it's so automatic, we don't even realize it. But during this experiment, it has you look at kind of how your body feels when you're opening certain things and when you're putting it down. And are you drawn to look back at it? Are you drawn to pick it up again? And then his last point, set a timer to check in 5 minutes. And when the timer goes off again, notice, any sensations you're having in your body. And a lot of the kids that I work with will say that they start to get ramped up when they're playing certain games, or even they notice their anxiety spikes when they're on certain apps, and things like that. So that's just an interesting thing I wanted to share. And then as we go to the next slide, just our impact on health. So one thing I'm going to have you ask yourselves, and this is something that we talk about a lot: does your child's technology use interfere with physical, sleep, nutrition, exercise? Would your child be sleeping better? Would they be eating better? Would they be exercising more if it wasn't for the tech? Are they, does it have a social impact on them? Do you see that affects how much they play with kids in the neighborhood, how much they have conversations? I had one of my employees recently, I saw her leaving the office, and I was watching her walk down the street, and it was kind of cute, but she was looking on her phone as she was like walking out. And there's actually, if you Google on YouTube and you want to show your kids something fun, there's a ton of videos of people walking while reading text and like falling into funny things. And it really did illustrate that for me. Communication skills, emotional, how they express and understand and regulate their emotions. If you have a child that is having tantrums or flipping out or has a hard time having a conversation, that's something that we look at. How are they with staying engaged in school? If you notice that there's a disruption with them going to school and doing their work, if they're falling behind or they're not able to get up in the morning and you see them kind of getting out of bed and grabbing a tech device and they haven't even like gotten themselves ready, that's an impact right there. Confidence and self-awareness. That's another one. Does this impact their confidence and self-awareness? Again, many of the kids I was talking to just this week, and some of them were dealing with eating disorder issues. We were talking about who they compare themselves to, and they were showing me different Insta famous influencers, and they were showing me these pictures of what they believe they should look like. And we talked about how this is real for them. They believe these are kind of real people that they should be trying to follow and mirror, when in fact, I was thinking it's kind of like when we were younger and we'd watch a sitcom, we knew those characters on TV weren't real. We knew they were a TV show. But for many of the kids on these social media sites, they see them as real people. They don't realize a lot of times they're filtered, or, it's not the whole story they're seeing. And so we've been having many conversations about that. American Pediatrics does advise not introducing tech before the age of 2 years old, 30 to 60 minutes on school days above age 2, and 2 hours or less on non-school days. This is non-educational time. This is not doing homework. This is not school time. This is more the video games and the apps like that. Children under 6, less time is recommended. So that is what they guide. They also encourage 15 minutes of physical or play for every hour of screen time. So if you have a child that's coming home and he's 15 and he's playing video games for a couple hours, they advise that he's at least getting a half an hour of physical exercise or movement to that 2 hours. We advise, as we're going to talk about too, not having the tech in the bedrooms unless absolutely necessary. And as we go to this next slide, we're going to talk about just some different examples of the tech. We have social media, and Marley, you could probably speak to some of this. We have social media, video games, messaging, tons of apps, movies, online surfing, YouTube. Those are some of the things kids tell me they really like. Marley, what would you say are some of the most popular apps for teenagers?
Probably like TikTok and Instagram and like Snapchat. Yeah.
How old do you think kids are starting to get on those apps?
Well, I coach cheer for second graders, and I know a lot of them even have like TikTok and like different apps like that. So like as early as like even 7 years old, I know people who have like social media apps.
Okay. And I think it's interesting because many of these too can be hard to monitor. I was working with one 7th grade girl, and mom brought her into me because yeah, for sure. She was concerned about her daughter was feeling a lot more depressed lately and had expressed some suicidal thoughts. And the mom had brought her into me, and I had a couple sessions with the daughter and the mom. And one of the things that came up is the daughter was in a room a lot on YouTube. And she had researched a YouTube video having to do with depression. And what happened is when you start to look up one thing, you get flooded with the same topic. So she was in a room, spending more and more time on her phone in her room, watching YouTube videos about depression. And then some self-injury ones came. And what happened is, as she was spending more and more time in her room on her phone, she was getting more and more depressed, and then she was being exposed to all this stuff that she was watching on YouTube. So when mom and I talked to her, mom decided to say, I'm really concerned about, how things are going. And so I really think you need more connection. We feel that the need behind what's going on here is more connection to us. And so mom started putting limits on the cell phone and had the cell phone not in the bedroom, and had the girl come out more with mom. The girl was really mad at mom for about a week, but what happened is we noticed that the depressive symptoms started to lessen over the weeks, and the girl even said that she was starting to feel a lot better not being so isolated in her room. And so a lot of times kids are going to say they want to be in the room, they need to be on their tech, but as the adults, we have to kind of gauge, is this healthy for them? Are they functioning in a healthy way, and how are things going? On the next slide, and this is some research too. Like I said, what is the purpose of the tech? If you're a parent, and again, I don't know how old your children are, but is this kind of to distract them? Is this to calm them down? Is this more to play a fun game, or is this like an educational opportunity? A lot of times we're really working with our children to be able to regulate their emotions in a healthy way, to be able to sit with downtime, to be able to converse with others. And so we want to be mindful of not using tech for someone to calm down. So if you have a crying child, we're giving in and we're giving them the tech so that calms them down. Or, we're at dinner and we want the child to be distracted, so we give them a cell phone or we give them an iPad. Again, it's not an all or nothing approach. There's going to be times where that's definitely appropriate, but I think on a whole, what we're noticing is if that's done, like giving tech to regulate emotions, giving tech to distract, giving tech so they're not bored, what's happening is our kids aren't having those opportunities to learn how to regulate, to learn how to sit with downtime on their own. We also encourage too, when we're interacting with our children, we try to be mindful of our own tech use, putting it down, walking away, having tech-free times in the home. And I'm going to go into some more examples of that as well. Just looking in the other parts of the research, the overall increase in tech, what we saw was about 15%. And this is not educational. So we're not talking about schools, giving homework on tech. We're talking about, aside from education, we're talking about like games and apps and cell phone and things like that. And so what we know is there is some developmental things that we know, the connection between the neurons increases more rapidly in children than adults. So they're more heavily influenced by the tech. They're more likely to get addicted to the tech. And it also does have an impact on brain development. So the more they're on it, we're seeing that is impacting kind of their emotional regulation, how they regulate, and kind of how they meet some of those emotional milestones. Some children will benefit from tech to build friendships in moderation. When we use tech in moderation and when we're teaching how to use tech, it can be a helpful tool. It can be a helpful tool to even connect with our own children. I know at one point when my daughter was in 7th grade and she was a little bit more challenging to talk to, I Snapchatted her and I learned about all the apps she was on and what she was doing. And it became, she appreciated that. And that actually became a really cool thing. On the next slide, American teenagers report spending an average of 9 hours a day on electronic use, not including time spent on assignments or school. This is just one study that came out. I was a little bit surprised by how high this number is, but many of the teens have said that when they're in school, even at times they're scrolling and they're on their tech. And I don't know, Marley, would you say that's pretty accurate?
Yeah.
Would you say 9 hours is pretty accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know if you would say this is accurate, Marley, but most teens and children interviewed said that they have been stressed by tech and have lost control as a result of tech use at some points.
Yeah.
And I would say that's true for me too. I hope my number's not 9, but it could be. It could be. And then on the next slide, again, the rewards we get from social media, there are real rewards we get. There's a reason why we keep going back. There's a reason why our brain gets addicted. Even between things like this, between the ages of 10 and 12, changes in the brain make social rewards, compliments on a new hairstyle, compliments on how we look. We start to really go after those likes. We start to go after those, and they actually produce like what we call happy hormones. And so when you look at some of the studies coming out, there's a physical reaction we get from tech, and there's a physical reaction that brings us back. And as we rely more and more on the likes and the positive comments, we can have more of a challenging, difficult time with not getting those likes or with getting negative comments. And that's what we're seeing time and time again. We also get a dopamine rush. And whenever we experience those social rewards, so we feel elated, we feel, although it's short term, it does not last. These rewards do not last, but they bring us back to get more rewards. And so we're constantly seeking that validation through those social media apps. Adults modeling tech. This is a big one. I was talking to a dad this week, and the son has a video game addiction. And we were talking about the son's use. And one of the things I asked the parents is, tell me about your relationship with tech. Tell me a little bit about kind of how you use tech and how you interface with it. And the dad was great. And he said, I have an issue with tech. I play a lot of video games and I'm on my phone a lot. And it's hard for me to get off of it. We're modeling, and we are our children's teachers about tech, and we're not always going to be well-liked or popular around this topic, because this can be really hard. And your kids might say other kids get to use it whenever they want. Just decide in your home kind of what the model is going to be, teaching the purpose for it, and being mindful of what our children are on, what apps they're on, what games. Practice, play them, be aware of them, understand them. For many of these games, kids can talk to other people all over the world. Well, that might seem cool. We don't always know who's on the other side of the screen. So we want to be mindful about educating our kids, setting those limits and setting those expectations. If possible, when you're talking to your children, try not to have, your phone out, putting things to the side. Again, it's not always going to be easy. And I definitely fall into this a lot. It's something I'm working on now, is just trying to put my phone to the side. And it's funny when someone texts me and I don't respond for a few hours. Sometimes I get those like question marks. Having tech-free time with our family. Sometimes some families even do like tech-free days, having, no electronics at meals or during game time, having time that we spend together that we're not on electronic devices. And even sometimes maybe we have some of the game nights are around the child's video game, and we all play together and we learn about the game. We learn about what they're using. Kids might really resist this. They may not like that, but that's okay. As we build it as a routine, they're going to adjust to it a little bit more. Having fun with our kids around tech, finding fun ways we can use tech together, finding those positives that can be educational, and being aware of kind of those safety measures that we have to take as parents, in following those age recommendations on the apps and games. And I know this is one that kind of many kids will say that's silly, we shouldn't have to, but just looking at why they're making the age restrictions. If they're recommending a certain app for 13 and up, kind of understanding why, and looking at some of the research of why they're really setting those ages, because most of the ages that are set are actually a little bit on the younger side anyway. And so, as Marley said, when we have 7-year-olds on TikTok and things like that, just being careful of what they're being exposed to. When we look at addiction, when we look at the technical medical term of tech addiction, these are some things that fall under that umbrella. Not all, but these are some things. So when you look at the list, it's everything from video games and computer game addiction, all the way to, smartphone, social media dependency, things like that, online gambling, online shopping, pornography, texting, online auctions, online betting. This is just some of the reports of things that people can get addicted to. And it can be, again, a diagnosis of that tech addiction. Signs of tech addiction, signs that you might have an issue or your child, retreating, spending more and more time in the room, having a hard time sleeping, staying up later and later. I work a lot with children that have a hard time engaging with school. A lot of the kiddos I work with that have a hard time getting motivated for homework and going to school have a hard time because of their tech addiction. You know, that they're very, I have one young lady I work with, and she is, she's doing these streaming videos, and she has had a hard time differentiating between reality and the streaming and the games. So it's interesting. We've been working on kind of that point of integrating both, because she's become so into her streaming world that she literally has lost some sight of reality, and she's living in this digital world. The length of use, excessive reactions. If you have a child that you set a limit to get off the tech use, and you see that they just completely abrupt, that's a sign that there is an issue. And so when we look at it, it's really that uncontrollable urge or impulse to continue using technology to the point that it starts to interfere with the child's mental, physical, and social life. And so we see that, and I talk to parents all the time, and there's a whole spectrum. It can be just, a small interference, or it could be something to the point that I see sometimes kids have a hard time with hygiene and functioning in school and things like that. And so when it's not being used for education, we really try to look at it as being used as more for a privilege, when all of the other expectations have been met, whether that's like, family time, school, work, chores. We really kind of look at it as a privilege, and trying to be mindful of where it's located in the house as well. On the next slide, we're going to talk about the addicted brain. And before we go over this slide a little bit, Marley, is this a good time for you now?
Yeah.
Marley just wanted to come tonight. And Marley, if you are just new to joining, Marley is in high school, and she just wanted to share a little bit about how she feels tech addiction impacted her and her mental health.
Okay, so I'm Marley. I'm 16. I'm a sophomore in high school. Okay, so technology is like obviously a very big part of like everyone's lives, especially like teenagers and kids, including mine. But a lot of time I find that it just like makes me feel more upset rather than happy, which like it's, I guess, kind of supposed to do. I used to be like really obsessed with social media. Like I would go on it like from when I woke up to when I fell asleep, and it caused like a lot of harm to my mental health. Spending so much time like looking at other people on social media made me like feel really like self-conscious and insecure about myself, which like I never really felt that before. I started like overusing social media, but like right when COVID started, I had like a lot of free time, so I'd spend like hours and hours looking at screens. Like if I wasn't on my phone, I was like watching TV or like playing video games or watching YouTube. And that was like not good for my mental health. Social media made my brain like quickly escalate from like feeling insecure from looking at all the other girls on my social media to like trying to change most things about myself. I wanted to like be happy with the way I looked, but like doing everything I did just kind of made everything worse. Um, I what I was doing became like really quickly unhealthy and turned into like an eating disorder. After getting treatment from like residential, inpatient, and PHP, I really like realized the role that social media played in developing my illness that like took over my life. Primarily TikTok and Instagram were the worst. I would scroll for like hours, and every minute I was on it, I would feel like worse and worse about myself. Um, I feel like technology is like a really cool thing and can help a lot of people, but obviously with limitations. Now I like put screen time on my phone so that I won't be on my phone for like 10 hours at a time anymore. Technology is like a big part of everyday life, but I really do believe that social media does more harm than good to teenagers and kids.
Thank you, Marley. And we'll let people ask questions at the end if there's some time. Alex, let's go by this slide. I have a lot of great information, so I know I'm gonna have to speed up here. Again, signs that there is an issue, as Marley said, for her, I think they really noticed with kind of eating issues. And these are other things, if your child's bartering a lot, if, feeling desperate to get the tech, any concern over self-harm or depression, any aggression, child's not meeting expectations, or having outbursts. One of the things parents will say to me a lot is, I can't limit their tech. I feel so bad. They're already struggling. This is what really makes them happy. Really, as kind of Marley said, that's part of that addictive brain, is when that's all that makes me happy as parents. Again, sometimes I think we avoid, setting those limits because we don't necessarily want to deal with those physical and emotional outbursts, which are almost impossible. It's really challenging. And so I'm going to share some suggestions on that as well. And so on the next slide, just some tips with supervision, and Marley has kind of emphasized how important that piece is, but just understanding what your children are on, what they're using, kind of what games they're into, how do they use it, and things like that. Some other things, having some unplugged time in the house, like I said, having conversations with their children about how they feel, when it's time to get off, how they feel before and while they're on it, kind of how it does impact them, and really being aware of how it impacts you as the parent. And I know that's something, again, I can share. I struggle with this too. So I'm really trying to be mindful. I mean, I'm on my phone without even realizing it sometimes. Looking at the age suggestions and ratings on things, and really, kind of doing some research and following that, and just practice learning with the kiddos. I have a couple family members that have real little ones, and I know they were watching things on YouTube, and before the mom really even realized it, she realized that some of the stuff they were watching had a lot of violence in it. And so it was impacting how the kids were then playing with each other. They were playing very aggressively, and she realized part of it was tied to what they were watching on the videos. And the next slide, we talk about just good ways to use tech. Like Marley said, there's definitely some good ways to use tech. It's a source of learning. It can help with creativity. Some of the kids like to use it for art. It can talk in moderation. It can help with socializing and planning things and communicating. We just don't want it to be the only way we socialize. You want there to be the balance. So we want kids also going out and doing things, and not just on the devices. If you feel like it's hard now, like you're at the point of no return, which you might feel like that, like we've allowed this to kind of go on and now we don't know how to reverse it. There are some ways that we can reverse it. And I work with parents all the time on this. When you go to the next slide, we're going to talk about some helpful tips, and I'm going to give some visuals. There's a good documentary I've hosted a couple times, the movie Screenagers, that sometimes parents will watch with their children as well. I thought that was helpful, and that did a nice job talking about tech. Just having, like we said, some activities that you do as a family where there is no tech, having some time, being mindful of the purpose of it. If you possible, not having it all be in the bedroom, having it be in a central location. Where I think it starts to be a concern is when kids are in the room hours and hours on the tech. Sometimes kids will sneak it if it's interfering with sleep and things like that. They do recommend for sleep hygiene, good sleep health, of getting off screens and tech at least an hour before bedtime. And doing that pretty consistently, and not getting on it like the first second you wake up. And so letting there be, like, if your child is going to be going to bed at 10, having them turn in phones or turn in devices an hour before. High schoolers, I know it's a little bit tricky. A lot of parents will tell me they'll have, and I'm going to show you some apps. There's apps that you can turn off the tech on your own device. And some parents will have kids put the devices in a central area. I think, Marley, you all do that in your family.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so all the kids have to put their devices in one area upstairs before they go to bed, because otherwise there's concern that kids are kind of, getting up in the middle of the night and using tech. Changing tech use in patterns. Sometimes, what we laugh about, don't try harder, try different, kind of trying a different schedule with tech, just changing things, creating a new routine around tech. It's not always going to be easy. And I think, we have this sense, and I know parents will say this all the time, I need to be able to communicate with my children. Really, there's other ways to communicate with them. I always encourage avoid texting your children when they're at school and things like that. We don't want to have 24-hour access with our kids. They need some time away from us. And part of their developmental process of learning autonomy is being able to start to lean on other supports like people at school in their life and things like that. Just setting goals and limits around the use, talking as a family about healthy use and why some of the changes might need to take place, coming up with different activities that we can do that don't involve tech. I know there's a lot of different things that we can do, kind of going back. I know as Marley has used less tech, she does more art now and does more, activities outside of the home. And just reminding ourselves that there are benefits, although sometimes it might get worse before it gets better. And the next slide, this is an example of, and I wanted to share this. This is one example if you feel like there's a concern with tech in your home. As we said earlier, it can be real helpful sometimes to use it as a privilege when it's not being used as education or something like that. So here was an example of what we did with one family. And this child was having a hard time going to school. And on days they weren't going to school, they were using tech. They were on their cell phone. And so one of the things the parents did is they said, okay, one of our goals is for the child to attend school more regularly. On days that the child is not attending school or completing their homework, they are not going to have access to tech. The expectation for this family was the child will attend school on time. And one of the privileges was that the child would earn 60 minutes of game time if they were on time, and then another 60 minutes if they had attended school all day. So for this family, they chose the 2 hours. And then the parents said one obstacle for them in implementing this was that they felt really guilty and they believed that their child would be really sad or depressed if if that tech was removed, and they were worried the child would be further depressed than they already were. And in fact, when they started implementing this plan, the child got really, really mad when they first introduced this, but the parents were consistent for 2 weeks. And we always advise when you're doing anything new in your home, give it 2 weeks of consistency every day. Parents had to go to work. And so what they had to do is remove a lot of the devices from the home. But ultimately, the child's behavior changed after the 2 weeks of consistency. And then on the next slide, here's just another example, and it's going to look different for every family, but I just wanted to give an example. If you do have a child that's really struggling with tech and not meeting their expectations in the home, we just encourage healthy use, but also that they are meeting their expectations. So they're going to school, they're having some social time with family and friends, and they're doing their homework. I'm not going to be as worried if that 2 hours is 3 hours of tech or, 2.5 hours, or what that number is, if it's balanced with other areas. And so just thinking about tech use as a privilege that can be tied with expectations, that can be helpful and effective. And these are some coping strategies we work with for our kiddos that really struggle. A lot of times we work on really looking at how it's impacting them. And when I'm working with a child or a teen that is having these responses, we kind of talk about the physical responses that we have from the addiction. And these are just some of the coping strategies we will practice in the office and really go through for both the parent and the child when they're struggling with things like that. And I encourage, as parents, I think we need to be using our coping strategies more now than ever, just because when our kids are battling with us or when they're ramped up, we need time just to calm down. And when professional help is needed, if you have, you guys have a great school district with great student service professionals, if you notice that your child is struggling, and not just with tech use, but with any of these, change in functioning, withdrawal, seems like they're isolating more, maybe they're in the room all the time and they're playing video games with friends. And so you think, okay, well, they're with friends, but they're not doing things outside of the house. They're not going out. They're not engaging in any social activity. You're just concerned that you're seeing a decline in mood and behavior. or any of these other things, reach out and just check in with someone at the school. There's many resources out there for help. And so these are just a list of things that if you're noticing, reach out to the school, reach out to the pediatrician or a counselor, and just kind of run it by them. And then on the next slide, these are some apps. You have to research these apps to see if they'd be a good fit for you, but these are some parent monitoring apps, and they did come highly recommended. Again, you'd have to research and see which one is the best for you. But these are apps that parents do use, and it goes by ages just to monitor. I know some parents and families use like Life 360 to monitor kids in different ways, and these monitor more the tech and go through on the apps. So if you have want to join, oftentimes we'll send out different parent tip sheets and things like that. Feel free to text to this number and we can add you to our mailing list. And then I wanted to leave some time for Marley and I to answer questions from all of you. And you can definitely ask Marley or me questions about anything that we've talked about tonight. And you can go to the next slide too, Alex. I think it's... So if anyone has any questions, feel free, and I'll see if there's anything. Again, I know somebody had asked about sleep and phones. I do not recommend that kids sleep with their phones. I actually think probably having them out of the room is more helpful than anything. What would be, Marley, what age do you think it is okay to buy a child a phone?
I know in my house, everyone gets a phone on their like 11th birthday. And I think that's like good. I don't know if it's like good to have social media that young, but like I feel like a phone at that age just to be able to like communicate with your parents, because you're starting to like hang out with your friends more and like do different activities. So to be able to like contact your parents, like where to pick you up and stuff like that would be good.
Well, I think, Marley, you did a really good job. I think, even saying, and I know you've said this to me before, but, just because a child has a phone, you can give the child the phone, and it doesn't mean they always have the phone. The child can have the phone for an hour when they've met their other expectations. And the earlier, what a lot of parents have taught me, the earlier you put in limits and boundaries around the electronic use, the easier it's going to be as they get older. So if when they're 11, they only get the phone for like an hour every day when they've done their homework and done their school and whatever, it's going to be easier when they get a little bit older. Marley, do you ever speak to younger children regarding your experiences with tech?
Not really. I mean, I would like to do more like speaking to younger children, but I haven't really done that yet.
Marley's presented with me on different topics, not necessarily tech, but Marley's been great. Actually, Marley and I presented to seventh grade? We presented to a whole middle school of kids. Marley and I presented to a whole middle school of kids on stress and anxiety.
Jackie, there was a question above if there are any programs for kids to talk to teens about electronics and social media.
I don't know if there's any, programs, and I don't know if there's as many teens as Marley is mature around tech use, but we definitely could look at something like that.
And I can say as a district, I don't think we have thought about doing those sessions with preteens yet, but it's definitely something for us to consider as we go. Jackie, do you do sessions presentations like that with teens?
Yeah. And it'd be fun just to even do a focus group with them, because I think, it's not about should they have it or should they not, but it is really interesting. When I started to do even that one experiment with how it affects me physically, I can say when I scroll, and I'm with Marley, when I scroll on Facebook, I never walk away feeling better about myself or anything. I just walk away feeling like, God, I don't have that many friends. It's why is everyone at a party, or why is everyone always happy? So I think these teens, and the other thing Marley and I talk about is so many kids will come to us and say, why does everyone think we have to be happy all the time? We're not successful because we can't be happy all the time. And I think social media kind of puts that on us, that you're supposed to look really great and supposed to give yourself facials every day and be working out and, wake up feeling refreshed. And, not many of us kind of feel like that. So yeah. Laura, did you have a question?
Okay. I think after COVID, we'd remember to unmute ourselves, but obviously that doesn't happen. My questions were really just around, I guess, mentoring programs. I'm assuming I could say what Marley is talking about to my daughter, but she won't listen to it coming from me. Whereas if, somebody who's other than, old mean parents are saying, hey, what's your experience? What's this? I think it would be very beneficial. Not necessarily like a peer program, but like a teen mentoring program. And that doesn't necessarily have to, be, the experience. I mean, this is going to sound bad. Having Marley have those experiences is a benefit in this aspect, but not necessarily needed in order to like, hey, almost like, hey, how are you feeling about this?
And we can even look at having like a panel presentation to teens, because we have a lot of high schoolers that would, with Marley, that would, talk about that, and even getting some different ages to talk about how they feel when, even asking questions like, how do you feel when your parents tell you it's time to get off Fortnite? And Fortnite's an interesting one too. But I hear a lot from parents. I feel like I can't limit the tech because, then I'm worried their mental health will suffer. And I think as Marley's expressed tonight, it's really the reverse.
Right.
I think sometimes if we don't get a handle on it, but I think that's an excellent idea. And we can work on that. And like I said, that movie Screenagers, I don't know how you can watch it. I don't know if it's easy to find, but that one talks from kids' points of view as well.
I wrote that down.
Yeah, that's
so
good.
Something,
yeah, and there's so many. Yeah.
I guess my next question that I was hoping, as far as like monitoring apps, I find it difficult to monitor not only the number of apps, what's within each app. I mean, I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and their habits are completely different. And so, I don't have the time to sit there and review all of their texts or all of their social media. I think I have one under control, and then I find out they have 3 more, profiles in TikTok. And I'm, I feel like I'm constantly, chasing my tail when it comes to that. But I worry if putting like a monitoring app would be so invasive, and how that would be perceived. I want them to have some privacy, but appropriate level for their age. But at the same time, how can I monitor both of them in addition to everything else?
I mean, I think a good start would be just, like I said, having maybe, they can be on their devices maybe for a couple hours. And, I think if they're, like I said, and I typically go by this, if the kids are doing well, if they're socializing, they're involved in something at school, they're going to school, they're doing their homework, they seem like their mood is okay. I mean, all kids are going to get cranky and moody at times, but if you feel like they're doing okay and you have a handle on the limit on the tech, that's a good sign. Where we start to get concerned is when we see kids really struggling, they're not getting enough sleep, or they're all of a sudden saying, my friends are all on tech. That's not true, but I do hear kids say that a lot.
Yeah, I see a lot of the, warning signs, but at the same time, I don't know if it's necessarily the amount of time, which that is one, contender as far as what this all is, but it's what they're doing on their phone. And, when is it not appropriate, but like, when is it appropriate to intervene among, say, group when it comes to bullying and stuff like that? Picking that level of involvement, or I guess kind of intervening if something's not going the way that, you feel it should be going. I don't want it to get to extremes, which is what we've, experienced.
Well, and I think too, just even practicing setting limits with them. I mean, that's one of the biggest thing I see the kids have a hard time with is when parents say, you can be on for an hour and they can't get off, practicing
Yeah.
that, and making sure they've met expectations. And that's something maybe we can do next year is having a presentation with parents and kids with, kids and me leading it, because we can have some, I think, dialogue and have kids and parents kind of feel. And
Mhm.
I did that at Barrington High School, God, 3 or 4 years ago. We had a whole thing with parents and kids. And that was when one of the kids stood up, because one of the moms stood up first and said, "Can you get our kids off these video games?" And one of the middle school boys stood up and said, "Can you get our parents off their tech? They're either texting or
Mhm.
emailing, and we need people to talk to."
Yes.
So, and it's true when you think about conversation and eye contact and things like that. And I share this story because I did have such an issue with some of this when I was a kid. To this day, my older daughter has like the best eye contact because we like did really work on it when she was little. So I always tell parents with young kids, don't just throw the electronics, spend time kind of talking and playing and giving them coloring books, because if they do get that stuff too young, it does,
Mhm.
you'll notice. I have little kids that are looking down on their devices,
Right.
and they're not even, somebody will walk in the room and they're not even acknowledging them. So it's
Mhm.
interesting. Do we
Yeah,
have any? Oh,
Jackie,
I
we have
totally-
another question.
okay.
It says, with more working from home, parents are still working when kids get home. How do you encourage kids to do other things while waiting for you to finish work, especially for only children?
Great question.
That is a great question. I think sometimes, it goes with kind of how you set up the tech use in the home. I mean, I think sometimes it is changing things up. And again, as we talked about, teaching them other things they can be doing, allowing our kids to be uncomfortable or allowing our kids to be bored sometimes. One thing I'll hear parents say to me sometimes is, "Oh, wait, I got to go back and give them, the phone," that they're going to be bored just sitting out there. And I think we forget that our kids can figure out creative things to entertain themselves through art or music or, different things. And I think making those things available. And you can even have conversations with kids, when you finished, doing these things, then you can, earn your tech or whatnot. I think sometimes it is about just being mindful of how many devices there are and things like that. And there's going to be situations where absolutely you can't, you can't control certain things. And as parents, we do the best we can. So, just think about what works for you and what you could implement from tonight that might be helpful for you. Typically, if I have kids that are really struggling with depression, eating disorders, any kind of mental health issues, we typically start to really limit the tech, and we start to bring it back as they start to do better. So a lot of times when kids are struggling with mental health, this tech can be more of a trigger than anything and create more problems. So a lot of times, and when you see kids that go into programs or hospitals, they're not allowed to be on tech. And even at the sleep study programs, they totally take the tech away. And so when they're starting to do better, we slowly reintegrate it. But a lot of times it's understanding the relationship your child and your family has with the tech.
I have a question for you, actually, Jackie. If you are going to start setting boundaries, do you recommend starting slowly or just kind of like cold turkey, set a boundary and go for it? What would you recommend?
I think it depends a little bit on the child's age. I think if the child's younger, I think that's a great time to start setting those boundaries and be aware of the purpose and the intentions. If you have a child now who's 15 and is in their room playing video games 15 hours a day, you don't want to come home and say, "Okay, we're yanking it out of your bedroom. We learned tonight that you shouldn't be in your bedroom." I think you have to, do it a little bit slowly, but you also want to be organized. So that family plan I shared on the slide, a lot of times parents will sit down and just say, "We're really concerned as a family, kind of how we're using tech. And so we're going to make some changes." Sometimes even making steps like bringing the tech out of the bedroom can be a great first step, not having them in the room, starting to make small changes and then really kind of gradually working on a plan. Whatever plan you create, you just want to make sure that you can be consistent with the plan. But for sure, if your child's not going to school, if they're not doing homework, try to move away from them having the tech when they should be at school or doing homework. What happens is I have a lot of kids right now that aren't doing what they need to with school and friends and social because they're on the tech so much. And if your child's not getting up till like 11 in the afternoon every day, and they're having sleep issues, kind of try to find out what's going on with tech at night if possible. Any other thoughts, Miss Marley?
I don't think so.
So awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marley. It was awesome to hear your perspective. Do we have any other questions from any parents? If not, we will wrap it up. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm so glad we had a good turnout and that you guys were able to get some questions answered. Oh, Laura, do you have another question?
Sorry, real quick. Can you go back to the text slide with the information on there? Thank you.
Marley, we have a project to work on now.
I'm willing to help.
I was
I would
going to
love
say,
to.
you're welcome to come test it with Woodstock. We're happy to be your guinea pigs.
That'd be
Yeah.
kind of fun.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to your social workers at your schools. And have a wonderful rest of your week, everybody.
Thank you. Marley, you were fantastic. I'm going to call your school tomorrow and tell them.
Yeah, awesome job, Marley. That was so interesting to hear. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
And everyone is right. You are great at public speaking.
Rockstar status. Great job, guys. Now just come talk to my daughter. Please. Oh, thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good job, team.
Okay, well, let me know if you need anything. That was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Jackie. That was awesome.
I will talk to you all later. Bye, Miss Marley.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice job, guys.
Thank you, Christy.
Thanks, Christy.
Have a great night.
Yeah,
Alex.
you too.
Alex,
Yes.
will you email me her presentation? And like, you don't have to do it right now, but her presentation and then a link for the recording. I mean, I guess the recording's still going.
Oh, yeah.
Stop that. I'll edit that out, but just so that I'll get it to the people who upload it to YouTube and all those pieces. So
Yeah, just to let you know, I did start it late.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I mean, we all forgot about it, but it's fine.
Yeah.
She didn't start saying anything super important before that, so it's
Yeah.
fine. It's all good.
Well, thanks for your help so far, Kristen. So,
Hey, thanks for doing all the things.
yeah.
My internet went out like 5 times. So I was like, well, this is great.
Yeah, I was wondering. I'm like, man, she must be super busy.
I didn't know. It kept going out and I like sat there awkwardly. I was like, okay, please tell me it's just me because we're all just sitting awkwardly in silence. No, it was my internet. So
That's why I stayed at work today because the last time we did it, my internet was so choppy that like I was just like, okay, it's not even worth it.
I know. And I've never had issues like this before. I was like, of course, the one night that I'm like, I
Yeah.
need my internet. No, of course not.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, I'll see you later.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye.